And so this report that you're talking about, it's a published report.
Yes.
It's a publicly published report. Okay.
Yes, available on fixhomelessness.org. And it was released at the time that this program actually collapsed. So
the program collapsed.
The program collapsed.
After the first year?
They continued through 2020.
Did they ask for more funding?
I believe so. So they said that they had a additional commitment and they were at like $11 million. And then I got data for the rest of their outcomes through, so it was a full calendar year. And the numbers got worse. It was, instead of being a $20,000 per person housed cost, it shot up to $26,000 per person housed and then collapsed for various reasons.
Thank you so much for taking the time to interview with me today. So I usually ask people to start by introducing themselves and telling our viewers where we're at.
Awesome. Well, I'm Caitlyn McKenney, formerly Caitlyn X. I just got married
Congratulations.
about a month ago. Thank you. And still getting used to the name change. And we are in Seattle, Washington, downtown at the Office of Discovery Institute, which is where I work.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. Well, I mean, some of the things that we have in common are we're both UW graduates. So I'd really like to talk a little bit about that. So are you from this area?
Yes. I grew up in Kirkland area. I went to Redmond High School and loved Seattle and stayed for college.
Yeah. And so you chose to go to the University of Washington.
Yep.
What interested you in the University of Washington?
I loved like the big bustling feel of it. I had looked at some smaller schools. And maybe smaller schools that were more aligned with like the things that I believe in, but was really drawn to like the fast pace and lots of people at UW, and also to like challenging my own views by being surrounded by people and professors that I knew from the get-go wouldn't necessarily agree with me on everything. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that you find value in putting yourself around folks that you're not always aligned with.
Yeah.
What do you get out of that?
I think just strengthening your own convictions and what you believe. But if not that, then changing, hearing something new and changing what you believe. But for me, a lot of it at UW really was like strengthening my convictions and having stronger, more articulate ways to explain why I believe something or why I disagree with something.
I really value that. So what was your focus?
I studied biochemistry. Okay. I love science and wanted to come away with a technical degree. And then I did a minor in ethics because I quickly realized that I've always been really interested in writing and reading and in thinking about problems that face humans and controversial issues and how we argue about things and how we think about things, ultimately how we view humans.
When did you graduate from UW?
2022.
Okay, so were you using public transportation to get to and from school?
For a time, yeah.
So did you come through the downtown corridor during that time, or did you come straight over from
I was
Kirkland?
coming from the east side, but I was also coming downtown on the light rail to like go to coffee shops and go to Pike Place Market.
Yeah.
So yeah, comfortable downtown. I think there was a significant shift during COVID time.
Yeah.
I stopped coming downtown.
You want to talk about that a little bit? What kind of shift, and when did you start to see it?
Yeah. Well, I just remember like my freshman year, so 2018, start of 2019, I would come downtown by myself on the bus or the light rail, even as it was getting dark, and felt totally comfortable walking to a coffee shop and then walking back by myself, getting back on the bus in the dark. And all of that, like I would never consider doing that now.
Did you notice a consistent shift on the campus of University of Washington in alignment with that shift downtown at all?
Safety-wise?
Yeah. Not necessarily the safety on the campus, but sort of a shift in ideology, a larger shift in ideology that sort of helped you see an alignment between the lack of safety in downtown.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think a part of it that's interesting is kind of the way that there's almost pretending like that wasn't happening, or like kind of a gaslighting, to use that word, of like reality and like, wow, I don't feel safe downtown with like, no, like everything's great and we don't need police and we don't need more law enforcement and we, like that kind of simultaneous reality, and then that ideological shift or is present, I think, all the time at UW. But
yeah, because I was thinking about it too. I remember in 2020, in some of the classes that I was in, I started to notice more inflamed engagement with a lot of our younger students around the ideas of race and policing and things like that. And I don't even know if I thought about that really until you and I were just sitting here talking today, because I also noticed a shift. I started to notice an increase in specific kind of behaviors on the street, and more of a push and a shaming in some of the environments on campus too. And maybe it was there the entire time and maybe I just didn't notice it, but I definitely noticed an alignment. And so I was just wondering, as a young person, because the younger generation, you guys have kind of been taught very differently to view society a lot differently than I did growing up. And so, I would almost say that you guys have been desensitized in a lot of ways to see certain things, or to even, approach the idea of your own safety in specific communities. And so, I was just really interested in knowing if that was something that you were able to intellectualize at the time.
Yeah, I think that time bubbled up to the surface a lot of things that had been laying down there for a long time.
Yeah.
And we saw that come up, and that was a challenge to navigate, but also a great opportunity to sift through what you believe and dialogue with people, because that was the other thing, is I was engaging with students and peers who had just a full spectrum of beliefs, no matter what we're talking about, whether it was the 2020 policing and George Floyd or COVID, like all of it was kind of a mass collision of a wide spectrum of beliefs on things.
Did you notice amongst your peers on campus sort of a very white and black thinking, not in regards to race, but black and white thinking in regards to you either are or you're not? Did you start to feel shut out by any of your peers who had previously engaged with you?
Absolutely. There was a very black and white thinking. Like, absolutely. It was, if you're not, if this isn't the narrative that you're subscribed to, then like, we don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
Thankfully, like I had great friends who we were able to have differences and still be friends or whatever. But yeah, I always felt that way at UW.
So you are getting close to graduation. What are you planning to do with your life?
I was figuring a lot out. I knew that I was passionate about a lot of different things, but didn't see a career path forward very clearly. And I'm so glad. I mean, I think the Lord just led me exactly where I needed to be, but realizing that like political advocacy was that wasn't something I even knew about. So I was interested in speaking into all kinds of issues or thinking about them, dialoguing about them. And when I graduated, I did an internship in Washington, D.C. for a pro-life organization on the science and research side. So kind of combining my love for science and research with a controversial, heated issue that science can speak into, but that we need more than just science to address. So loved my time there doing that. And then wanted to be back in Seattle. And so this Discovery was a great like-minded spot to end up. And in a different issue, but still some of the same controversy, same questions about human value and dignity, and autonomy, and same political involvement going on. Yeah.
So how long have you been here at the Discovery Institute?
About a year and a half.
And how has it been for you?
It's been fantastic, and I've had just so many opportunities to grow personally and professionally here. Started entry-level kinds of things, helping behind the scenes with a lot of the things that we're doing with our Fix Homelessness initiative. And then now I'm writing weekly articles on housing policy and starting a podcast, and got to do a research report that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So I've just had lots of opportunities to get really involved.
Yeah. So I didn't know anything about the homeless initiative, so I'm a little bit interested.
Oh, yeah.
So what are you guys doing?
Well, that's just so Discovery Institute has a lot of different programs. One of them is the Center on Wealth and Poverty, which is like our economics free market program. And then the Fix Homelessness Initiative is our homelessness project within that.
Okay.
So that's my main area of focus. And that's where the research falls under.
Okay.
Jonathan Cho's reporting work is part of that.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about this report that you brought up. So you mentioned a report. So what is the report about?
Yeah. The report is about the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's spending and an outreach program that they started. So the King County Regional Homelessness Authority was created in 2022. It's a continuum of care. And so it was designed to take state and county and city funding for homelessness, and then distribute it out to nonprofits working to address homelessness in King County. And they also decided to start their own outreach program, which is a little unusual. We don't normally see that happen. And they had a $10 million investment right off the bat from...
Did they make the decision on that investment, or was that allotted specifically to their outreach program?
I don't know how that came about, but it was for this outreach.
So that $10 million was allotted to that program after they developed it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know if they referred for that money, or, I mean, I don't even know if that's what, you understand what I'm saying. I didn't know if they made the decision to give themselves that money or if that was given by the county or
so
city.
It's separate from like all the contracts that they do. That's public funding. This was like a unique blending of public and private, or they called it a public-private partnership.
Okay.
So $10 million, a lot of that from Alaska Airlines, Boeing, Starbucks, Bill Gates Foundation, kind of all of those big players. And then there was also a portion that was public taxpayer dollars from King County.
And then what was their intention with this outreach program?
Yeah. The goal is, I think, to go out on the streets. They had 100 outreach workers. Mm-hmm. I think all of them...
Where did they hire them from?
I think all of them were recently homeless.
Oh.
So, hired to go out on the streets. They were being paid about almost $100,000 a year.
I did. I saw that. I saw that price range was between $82,000 and $92,000 a year for recently...
homeless.
Now, were the homeless people they hired housed at the time?
I don't know.
Oh, so no clear information on that.
No.
Okay, so paying potentially currently homeless people.
Yes, to do outreach. And that's double what other nonprofits in the area are paying their outreach workers.
For sure.
And I don't have a huge issue. Like, if they were doing amazing work and they could show us that they were extremely successful, then okay, like maybe it's worth paying you $100,000. I don't really have an issue with that high salary. Yeah. But that's not the case.
It's a very high salary. As a supervisor of 3 programs for Catholic Community Services, my best year when I worked enough overtime was $42,000.
Yeah.
So, and that was just, I had left that position in 2019. So, as a single parent in Seattle. So, I mean, $82,000 or $92,000, whichever end of the range they're on, that's pretty significant.
Yes.
Pretty significant.
And the results were extremely disappointing.
What were the claims, first of all? Did they say the claims for housing, how many people they would have housed at the end of that annual year?
Yes, they did. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, I've got your back.
It adds to the, it's funny, but it's not funny. So the CEO at the time stood before, when they made the announcement to the city, stood before everyone, the media, and said that they could get the number of people experiencing homelessness in downtown Seattle down to 30 people.
And how many people were experiencing homelessness at that time?
In King County at that time, around a little over 13,000.
Oh.
I'm guessing majority of those are in downtown Seattle, or at least the unsheltered population. 13,000. They even claimed that it was more like 50,000. I don't know what the actual number is.
Right.
But the point is down to 30 in 1 year.
With this group of 100 outreach workers who had just recently come out of homelessness. Okay. And then, which is interesting, because it takes even a seasoned case manager to have access to all potential housing resources is pretty significant. And I don't even think there are enough low-income units to cater to that many people, at least. So, and I worked for Coordinated Entry for All through Catholic Community Services, and I can tell you this, we were jockeying for position most weeks. You know, we all had a handful of clients that we were bringing to the table who were the most vulnerable, and there were rarely 5 units to spread out amongst the masses, and I don't believe that we have built a whole bunch more living units here in Seattle.
Yeah, certainly not 13,000.
So what was the outcome of that year?
So
definitely it wasn't all the way down to 30, I'm guessing.
So no, not even close. It ramped up, I think the end of the summer of 2022. I think I'm correct on that. And within their first year, which had the $10 million funding, they say they housed 100 people, 115 people. So that's 100 outreach workers, $10 million, 115 people housed.
And how much money was spent directly for the project? The people amongst staff or employee payment, housing costs, and the individuals they served?
So in 2022, they spent about $2.2 million, $2.3 million.
So where did the other $7.7 million go?
That is something that I tried really hard to figure out and had long email exchanges with the public records officer, and we couldn't figure that out.
And so this report that you're talking about, it's a published report?
Yes.
It's a publicly published report? Okay.
Yes, available on fixhomelessness.org. And it was released at the time that this program actually collapsed. So
the program collapsed?
The program collapsed.
After the first year?
They continued through 2020.
Did they ask for more funding?
I believe so. So they said that they had a additional commitment and they were at like $11 million. And then I got data for the rest of their outcomes through, so it was a full calendar year, and the numbers got worse. It was, instead of being a $20,000 per person housed cost, it shot up to $26,000 per person housed and then collapsed for various reasons.
And any data reported on whether the people that they claimed that they housed actually remain housed?
No.
Or what kind of housing they were in?
No.
None of that kind of information?
No, I think I got some numbers on type of housing, permanent, supportive, hotels. Yeah.
Oh, some of the hotels.
I think so.
The local hotel programs.
Yeah.
Like, I won't call any out. So that's really interesting. And so KCRHA is a nonprofit, correct?
KCRHA is a government agency.
Oh, it's a government agency.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why it's interesting that they started an outreach program, because that was privately funded. It feels like nonprofit work mixed with government.
Yeah, because, I mean, it made me think that they were a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And then their funding should be completely transparent, right? What
Absolutely.
They do with their money.
Yeah, it's a government agency. It's public money. Yeah, that was another big takeaway from my report is I looked at all of the contracts that they were giving out to nonprofits. Yeah. So this is government money.
So just KCRHA as an agency.
Yes.
Okay.
Distributing funds to nonprofits.
And how much, because I believe your report was over 21 and 22, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How much money did they give out to other agencies in Seattle during that time?
Yeah. So in 2022, which was their first year in existence, they gave out $107 million in contracts.
$107 million.
$107 million.
Okay, so
about 55 organizations.
Okay, I remember on the top of the list, only because I'm really familiar. I'm familiar with a lot of I'm familiar with 100% of the agencies that you had listed because I was a liaison and I've worked within that entire structure for a long time. But the number one on the list is my alma mater agency. And do you remember how much money they were given?
I think the highest was over $10 million.
It was over $13 million.
Yeah.
And do you remember how many people they housed that they had recorded as housed? 100 people.
Yeah.
For $13 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found that to be really interesting, but not surprising for me, though. Well, I guess that's not true because when I worked for them, I housed a lot more people than that. But I want to...
And, a big part of this was about transparency. So I'm digging through their websites for anything that they're providing publicly and then also contacting them and saying, here's what I'm doing. Will you provide your numbers? So maybe it's true that they actually did house more people than that.
But they're not making
issue is
it
that
public knowledge.
They wouldn't tell me, and they're not telling the public at large. And about half of those top recipients, $10 million contracts, would not tell me or do not make available to the public
the information,
basic information.
Well, which is really interesting because I know that everything that we do is reported into the HMIS system. So, and the HMIS system is there to report to funders and things like that. And the funders are the city. Yeah. So that's a little bit confusing.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It is. So when otherwise, if it's not written down, it's not documented or it didn't happen, right? If it's not documented, it didn't happen. And I was trained that from day one in going to work for a social service agency. So whenever I housed somebody, I had to report it in HMIS, but I also had to report it in some interagency documentation because those numbers have to go back to the city or whoever is giving that funding.
Do you think that all of these nonprofits receiving government funding
are
reporting directly to the government? Okay.
Yeah, everybody uses the HMIS system. And so, and sometimes it's, they rename it and stuff, but yes, they all do. Your agency, you get access into the system. And so you'll have your own sign. And if you're a case manager that works under me, if you work with somebody, you have to enter in case notes and talk about what it is that you did. So
it doesn't seem like the government is doing a great job of analyzing those outcomes and doing any kind of business like decision making of saying, okay, here's how many this group housed, here's how much we're funding them,
this is where they were housed,
and then we rank and we make adjustments based on who's doing an effective job, and it doesn't appear that kind of thing is happening just based on how much funding continues to be given and the variation in results.
Yeah, well, and this is what I can tell you. And I really actually got very excited when I was reading the report because I was like, oh my gosh, somebody's finally saying it out loud. Because as a program supervisor, I entered information into a couple of different systems. And, when I housed somebody, so over a 3-year and 2-month period of time that I worked as a supervisor of the housing case management programs, it was my job to train my staff, 5 staff amongst 3 programs to house people. What constituted as housing is like, for example, if you have a mom in Alabama, now I had to make sure and have it approved and talk to the mom in Alabama, who could have really been anybody, and say, oh, so-and-so, says that they can come home. If I send you on a bus, that constitutes as housed. If you go into a temporary placement in a hotel, that constitutes as housed. If you go into low-income housing and you're immediately evicted, well, you still count on my house number. If you die in housing, well, then you're housed. If you get evicted and you're back in shelter a week later, that doesn't mean that I didn't get you housed last week.
Right.
So when we're looking at the numbers, I think that it is challenging to really say anything. We're not looking at outcomes, right? We're not looking, and that was my biggest question with the report is okay, but what are the outcomes?
Sure. And I think what we're trying to say is, look, if you won't even tell us this kind of information, like your best looking number, then how could we ever expect to get those kind of outcomes, which we agree, those are the important ones. It's not about just putting someone in housing and calling it good and goodbye.
But I think it's a really good starting place,
But if you can't, and if we can't even get that data, then we have a serious problem.
You know what? And I agree with you 100%, because that $13 million isn't the only funding, or the $10 million for DESC or the, whoever was next in line, and those are just two of the biggest ones in our community that drive a lot of the narratives, that drive a lot of the policy around housing first and our homeless industrial complex. So with that, the rest of the report, that's actually very exciting for me, because I want to cover some stuff on this. Who did you find housed the most people?
Yeah, so I wanted to get to that actually. Yeah. Because what we did when we were looking at KCRHA's own outreach program, the $10 million funded one, was compare their cost per person housed to Union Gospel Mission and Salvation Army. And I was looking specifically at their kind of street level mobile outreach operations. That was the closest to what it seemed like KCRHA was doing. And we wanted to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And so Salvation Army and Union Gospel Mission are doing a far more effective job with far less funding. Union Gospel Mission doesn't take government funding. Salvation Army does. And both of them are housing people at a fraction of the cost that KCRHA was.
They're smaller agencies too.
Yes. And not 100 outreach
they're not
workers.
And they're lower paid staff also.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm guessing, we weren't tracking the long-term outcomes either, like you're talking about. But I'm guessing that those would also look better. Just theorizing that those are also better than what KCRHA was doing, because I think both of those groups care about the whole person. And do a good job of addressing more of that.
I can speak to Union Gospel Mission specifically when it comes to their programs. They might be one of the only, I don't know, they might be one of the only abstinence-based drug programs around. And I know that they house a lot of folks through that. They have a men's and a women's program here in Seattle, and they're phenomenal. I went through the Union Gospel Mission, the Hope Place.
Okay.
And they're very...
You did that program? Oh,
I didn't do the whole entire program, but I definitely started there. They're abstinence-based. I actually want to cover some stuff on the programs that work. And I know Salvation Army used to have a 6-month treatment program. And I know that they shifted to government funding a number of years ago. So I don't know if they're still 100% abstinence-based.
I think that they are still operating that, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, but I don't think that they're overly funded. So I really love hearing that. That makes me, we've taken... accountability out of the hands of the individuals that we're serving in these structures, and we're dumping millions and millions of dollars,
hundreds of millions,
into these nonprofits who are not leading people like myself to self-sufficiency. Because they're serving a lot more than 100 people a year.
Yeah.
At least I would hope so, for $13 million plus. And that's only from the KCRHA funding. Yeah. So how did you, as a young person who doesn't come from that kind of background, before you went into this work, did you have an idea or a perspective? No. And what did you think you might find when you started doing this? Did you feel naturally kind of compelled to believe these well-meaning faith-based agencies? Because Catholic Community Services is faith-based.
Yeah. I was not involved in this area at all prior to coming here, and this was one of the first projects that I did, and I learned so much from it, and it was shocking. I had no idea. I had no idea just how much money was in this whole infrastructure.
It's an industry. Right? It's an industrial complex.
Yeah. And it's hard to even wrap my head around the kind of contracts that are being handed out. And it was especially perspective setting. I went and toured Bybee Lakes in Oregon facility there. It's like a whole wraparound. I don't know if you're familiar. Fantastic. I don't know how many, they serve 300 people, and they have everything there. And when it's huge. huge. And it's like medical and daycare and schooling and everything.
Is the goal in that program for people to come out of it and not need services anymore?
Yes. It's like a full transformation program. Fantastic. And the director said a number for like if they had, $4 million, they could help successfully transform like 300, it may have been more. Lives per year. And I think that was, and it was this huge, this huge facility. And I'm thinking of this report that I just did and all of these organizations getting, $10, $13 million just from the government.
And that's just one little piece of their funding.
Yeah.
That doesn't include other government funding.
Private
funding, which they do a lot of private fundraisers annually.
Yeah. So we need more transparency and we need
oversight. Yeah. I mean, just knowing that, is it a surprise to you that we've had a 23% increase? And there was an article that I'm quoting this from, that we've had a 23% increase in homelessness in Seattle.
Yeah. And I think a significant portion of that was unsheltered street level. So obviously what we're doing is not working.
What would a working social service system look like?
Well, I think there's just a very basic, high-level, common sense understanding, right? Which is if we have 13,000, if we say we have 13,000, now 16,000 people experiencing homelessness, then something that works is gonna, a year from now, we'll have less. And 2 years from now, we'll have even less, right? Like just a basic decrease in that number.
Yep.
And, maybe that number has issues or maybe we're not tracking that well enough. But still, like if something's working at a very fundamental high level, we should see a drop in those numbers, I think.
Do you think that just putting somebody inside of a box where they're not being rained on and maybe they can eat is a solution?
Yeah, and then that's the second piece, right? It's like, where are they going? And are they living
do they even know how to live there,
flourishing lives with community and friends and family and jobs and health? Or are we putting people alone in isolation in an apartment by themselves and like patting ourselves on the back like we've done a great job? That's it's cruel. It's not working. It's not treating people as whole people. It's just treating them as bodies that need 4 walls and a roof. And that's not compassionate. Yeah, it's not loving.
Do you think that people that you see on the streets downtown Seattle are capable of living a life worth living?
Yeah, I think everybody is.
Yeah.
I think your story is a powerful testament to that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that today what we're seeing is kind of losing our sense of what a good life looks like, or not being willing to say this is a good life and this is a life that's not being lived to its fullest. And I think, someone would have looked at you and like, those are the choices that she's making. And so we're going to respect that, right? Mm-hmm. And let her continue that. And that wouldn't have been seeing you as your fullest self or potential, and we'd be missing something beautiful. So
I like to argue that people did respect it. They respected the fact that when I committed crimes against them and when I perpetrated against others in society because of my addiction, that they respected me enough to remove me from victimizing other people and continuing to victimize myself. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness they respected me enough to hold me accountable.
Yeah.
I don't think we're doing that today.
No.
So 2021, 2022, KCRHA is still functioning. They are still...
Today?
Yeah, they're still, making decisions on who gets what money. And
They are. They've taken a lot of hits. They've lost their CEO. Their interim CEO, I think, just stepped down. They've faced a lot of backlash externally and also from within city leadership. So I think we may see them be completely defunded and go defunct. Mm-hmm. But we'll see.
What do you think that means for the larger area nonprofits?
I think most likely all of those contracts will be redistributed back to where they were being handled before from within the city or county. So I doubt that those nonprofits are too worried about their funding, unless we see some positive change, which we are seeing from city leadership, to say, wait a second, like we need to relook at all of this. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Is it working? How do we define that?
Yeah. How do we define working?
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of words that get thrown around, evidence-based and data-driven, and I would argue that I'm not seeing any evidence that... I definitely see a lot of evidence that these entities are providing inputs, but I don't really see outcomes that would support a decrease in percentages of the homeless population, because if somebody doesn't learn how to address the underlying causes, they're not going to be able to sustain any kind of housing. And we're dumping, as you were able to see with your own eyes, and this was just a little tiny bit of money in comparison to the overall picture in Washington state, let alone in our entire nation.
Yeah. And it's not just about successfully exiting people from homelessness and making sure they don't re-enter. It's also about stopping it on the other end of people entering homelessness. And there are so many factors there, I'm sure, that we could talk about, but that's another piece of this as well.
Yeah, because we're not addressing, well, and right, it starts long before, right? This is just a graduation. That's what that makes me think about. The homelessness is just a graduation of other problems, right? And it seems like we have a system that's kind of set up. Conveyor belt.
To facilitate that, yeah.
Ooh. Well, maybe we're going to have other interviews moving forward after you do some more reporting. So please keep me updated and posted. Is there anything else that you would like our viewers to know before we go today?
Just to support groups like Union Gospel Mission that we know are doing good work and really, truly helping transform people's lives. That was something we really wanted people to take away from this report, was to uplift them as an example of great work. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time today, Caitlyn.
Yeah, thank you, Ginny.
All right.